and welcome to the Tavern Chat Podcast. I'm your host, Eric Tenkar, your bartender in the OSR, a main proprietor at the Tenkar's Tavern blog, Discord server, media group, Facebook group, Twittering, and Instagram, apparently. So, I was thinking, what am I going to talk about today? And I had an idea, but I also had a voicemail that was waiting to get listened to, and I listened to it. It's from Apocalypse Nerd. And you know what? His questions are good ones, and there's one that's going to be hard to pin down because people don't agree on it, at least when it comes to the answer. But let's listen to Apocalypse Nerd, and then we'll go on, and I'll try to answer as best I can.
Dumb question. Could you define OSR in a little more detail? I do understand that OSR means old school role playing, but I'm never sure if it's really just playing in the style of older games like earlier editions of D&D, or is it the game system that you're using itself, which is trying to emulate the old systems like earlier D&D systems? Because I've heard of, Swords and Wizardry, but I think that uses its own game system. Also, some systems use the open game license I've heard you refer to. Now, what system is the open game license? Is it a modern system, or is it allowing people to play like use earlier editions of D&D? So, again, just wanted a little more clarification on what OSR really is. Is it just the game system? Is it the style you're playing in, no matter what system you're using, or is it a combination of the two? I know it sounds dumb to ask that, but thank you.
All right, so the question, really, it's two questions. What is the OSR, and what is the OGL? All right, the Open Game License. We're going to start from the beginning. The Open Game License, which Wizards of the Coast issued along with 3rd edition D&D, they imagined it as it was written that this was going to allow people to write adventures, support material for 3rd edition. They didn't really expect it to be used to create new games, let alone create games that emulate older editions of D&D. Now, why is that important? Because people like to play things that are living. And yes, D&D is a living thing in a way. People never stop playing. But if you're a publisher, you don't want to refer to people, well, listen, if you're going to play this adventure I wrote, you need the 1st edition AD&D rules, which, by the way, declaring compatibility is, I guess, a no-no under the Open Game License. But if you could have a rewrite of those 1st edition rules, that's what Osric was, then you can refer to those rules. It's compatible with Osric and 1E Gaming, and now those rules are in print. So if somebody wants to go out and not look for a 20 or 30-year-old book, they can get the Osric rules, which is pretty much 1E rewritten. 1st edition D&D rewritten to be better presented. It takes a lot of the Gygaxian prose away and makes it easier for somebody to absorb. So, Osric, which Matt Finch, who later authored Swords and Wizardry, was one of the two main people behind it, along, in the case of Osric, with Stuart Marshall. Matt decided, well, I've already written a simulacrum or an emulator for 1E. What about if I could do it for White Box, the original D&D, which technically White Box was a wood grain box earlier, but we're not going to get into that. So, we got Swords and Wizardry. Now, Swords and Wizardry has different versions. It has original Swords and Wizardry Core, which was the white box rules, and then some of the variables from the supplements, like variable dice, because the original was only D6, D20. Then you have white box Swords and Wizardry, which emulates that original white box, stripped down version of D&D. Then you have Swords and Wizardry Complete, which adds in the extra classes that were introduced and makes it a little bit deeper game. To me, it plays a lot like 1E, how we played it, not playing with the extra fiddly bits. And you have Labyrinth Lord, which came along to replicate basically basic expert D&D. And then you've had other clones come along. Old School Essentials, which is another basic expert. Venture Conqueror King system, which takes basic expert and pretty much ramps it up to 11. You have the games that are built off of Swords and Wizardry, like White Star. So now your other part of the question, which is, what does OSR mean? And that's the fun part, because people don't agree on what OSR means. They can't tell you what the R means. Old school role-playing, old school Renaissance, old school revival. Okay. So let's go away from that part. We'll go, what does OSR mean when it comes to games? People can't agree on that either. Some people think OSR specifically means games that are built on editions of D&D and their variants before 3rd edition. So pretty much up to AD&D 2E. All right. Others say, no, it goes further than that. OSR includes like the original Traveler and RuneQuest and basic role-playing and Call of Cthulhu and other stuff. Then you have people that say, no, OSR is anything that feels old school when you're playing it. All right. My definition, and this only applies to how I see it. I see the OSR, whatever that R stands for, to refer to clones, simulacrums, and beyond, games that are built off of AD&D 2E, AD&D 1E, Basic Expert, BECME, the Rules Cyclopedia, the original white box, brown box, D&D, and the supplements. That, to me, is OSR. But that also includes, like I said, Swords and Wizardry, Labyrinth Lord, Venture Conqueror King system, Lamentations of the Flame Princess, and games that take another generational step away from that. Games that White Star, which is a science fiction take off of the Swords and Wizardry engine, which is built off of the original white box D&D, but using that open game license, which allowed you to take that system resource document from 3rd edition and take it in directions that Wizards of the Coast did not expect. Literally. I see OSG, or old school gaming, to include pretty much any games that were played in that initial silver age of gaming and earlier. If the golden age of gaming is one edition for AD&D 1E and earlier, okay, just throwing that out there. So I guess what's that? 85. So that would mean things like Bushido and the original RuneQuest and Call of Cthulhu and Tunnels and Trolls. That, to me, is all that old school gaming stuff. That's the golden age. Silver Age would be from anything before AD&D 2E ceased. And there was an overlap with 2E and 3E, but let's not get into that. So that would include games like the original Pacesetter games like Space Ace and Time Master. That's like the Silver Age. This is how my mind sees it. And then we have that post-2000, and that is newer games that have been built off that. And I don't really follow those newer games so much, so I'm sure I'm not going to do a great job in pulling names up for them. Most of the games that I'm still interested in are games that have their roots, whether it's a later edition of Traveler or RuneQuest or Legend, which built off of RuneQuest. my games have roots generally before 2000. Even Warhammer, Fantasy Roleplay, that's like a Silver Age game in its engine. And the 4E was a mutinous mutation. But you're not going to get people to agree on this. And I'm not saying that my definition is right. Okay, that's one thing about the OSR as a community. There's a large degree of we will agree to disagree. And one thing that we don't all agree on is what defines OSR. Now, some people are going to be very dogmatic about their beliefs of what the OSR stands for. I'm not. Okay? I don't have the idea that there are heretics in gaming and shit like that. But, case in point, if you look at, and I'm going to mispronounce it, so I'm going to open this book up to its title page. Mörk Borg, the Swedish heavy metal inspired takes old school gaming look up to 11. It's not. It calls itself OSR. It's labeled OSR on the drive-through marketplace. It's not OSR. Is it OSR inspired? Certainly. Is it death metal inspired? Most definitely. But the system is not old school gaming inspired even. And that's okay. Doesn't mean it's not going to be a good book, not going to be a good game. But I guess for marketing purposes, OSR still has value. Even if we can't tap down that definition. Now, I'd love to hear from the listeners. You can either email 10cars.tavern@gmail.com and tell me what your personal definition of what OSR and old school gaming stand for. It might be similar to mine. It might be totally not similar to mine. It might be more expansive. It might be more limiting. But I'd like to hear it. And it was a good question. And I don't know if my answer was good enough or not. But I tried. All right, folks. Oh, now one thing I should say before I step out. There is a definition of OSR that says the game must be released under the open game license. In other words, yes, you can make a profit off it, but other people should be able to build off it. So some people say that definition would include things like Original Traveler, since you have the Cephalus engine or whatever they're calling it. And it would include things like, I guess, basic role-playing now, because they've kind of sort of opened that up. There are other games that have put out their own open game licenses. And games have roots earlier on. So that's another thing. It doesn't, or there are games that are certainly building off of D&D, Stars Without Numbers from Kevin Crawford, and others in that stable of his. Amazing work. Great stuff. If you haven't seen his stuff, look it up. Stars Without Number is available for free, the stripped down original version. But I don't believe he publishes under the OGL. So it doesn't mean you can't do work off his, but you'd have to get his permission. Just throwing it out there. All right, folks. As has been the case, we are still under the restrictions of the pandemic. I am not a medical expert or professional. So, my advice to you is take actions that are common sense and protect your health, your safety, and that of your friends, family, loved ones, community. And if you have questions about what that common sense would be, refer to a health professional. And as always, be safe, be well, God bless. Roll those dice, and I will talk with you all tomorrow. All right, folks. Laters.